Secret of Mana, Seiken Densetsu, the fantasy, action-oriented JRPG steeped in 90s decadence, color, saturation. This series was everything Final Fantasy wasn't. At the time, if you picked up something from Square, it probably looked a little bland, and it was turn-based, and slow, and really serious. But there, on that cliff, it's Koichii Ishii! Hey guys, watch this! Oh, what's he doing up there? I don't know, man, shut up. And in that fateful moment, a rich new world was born. A world that would take time to shape, but whose potential seemed infinite. I know it looks rough, but hey, the old Pokemons are great. This looks similar. Yeah, it took a while to rev the engines. So Seiken Densetsu the First, or Final Fantasy Adventure, because it wasn't really its own thing yet, is an extremely basic expression of the principles that would define the series. You're a guy exploring the world in real time, often adventuring with incompetent people, you kill monsters with the many different weapons you collect. There's a plot, I guess? Oh hey, it's the Dark Lord. I was wondering if you knew where I could find the plot. Oh! But all told, there isn't much reason to play this game over something like Link's Awakening. See, Zelda was smart. They gave their guy a hat. This dude's just Fighter from Final Fantasy. And unlike Link's Awakening, the controls are stiff, limited to 4-way movement, and enemies don't react to your attacks. There's a lot of kiting involved in killing enemies when you don't overpower them. And between bloated health pools, attacks seemingly never connecting, you never really get the feedback you need to make tactical choices as a player. You need to feel the game more than react to it. Now, the game bridges the Zelda Final Fantasy gap with RPG elements like level ups and equipment. Leveling up is picking one of 4 options, all of which are good. It's idiot-proof. It's cool that the different weapons serve as puzzle solvers and traversal tools as well, like the axe can cut trees and the sickle cuts grass. You ever grabbed a post with a whip and hurled yourself through the air with the strength of one arm? Nearly 20 years of jacking off! There's a meter at the bottom that fills over time, barely affects the game till the end, where it turns into an invincibility frame, cross-screen attack abuse mechanic. Pretty silly overall. Now I know this is gonna blow your mind, but there's dungeons too. They're mostly just kill rooms, but occasionally there will be a puzzle, turning enemies into snowmen and pushing them onto a pressure plate, you know, very normal things. You know, the entirety of the gameplay loop is extremely predictable, almost to the point of comedy. Watch a cutscene, dump all your money on new gear, get an ally, do a dungeon or 2, repeat 4 hours. But the moment-to-moment gameplay is fine. It's real simple. Load a new screen, deal with it. The allies who accompany you are almost useless, basically do nothing. I don't know why they're even here. Holy shit. They're not all bad. Sometimes they help out, and a few of them have really useful or straight up broken abilities. The princess character will drop a heal over time spell on you on demand. That's insane. The robot will refill your mana on request, so you've got infinite healing. But they only last a short while, sometimes dying horribly. If you hadn't picked it up yet, the game is morbidly silly. If not for the terrible translation, then for the world itself. This ain't some goblin to god affair. We're killing Rabites, faces, black mage? Yeah, Koichii Ishii worked on Final Fantasy. It only makes sense there'd be some crossover. Moogles, mages, even a rideable chocobo appears. And this plot is crazy. I'll give it one thing. I had no idea where any of it was going at any point. The Dark Lord's trying to acquire the power of mana. You talk to the Gemma Knight who lives by the waterfall. The game turns into Castlevania. Now we're on an airship. He's burning the bridge. We're falling. Again. I can't do this anymore! My back is fractured! My chocobo's f***ing legs broke! Hey, no problem, pal. I sawed off your chicken's busted legs and swapped in some metal ones. And a turbojet engine! I think what really makes the game cool, one factor that really sets the series apart, is the focus on boss fights. There's 23 boss fights in total, fewer if you don't count form changes between cutscenes and reused bosses, but overall, they breathe life into a game with a fairly stock appearance. A lot of the fights are simple patterns and kiting, but they do just enough damage to be challenging and interesting. The diversity is impressive too. Dragons, creatures from Greek myth, Cthulhu monster, krakens, a lot of neat room designs that leave you feeling cramped and cornered. And it's like, you never know what you're gonna fight. Bipedal mantis demon? Androgynous half-snake? You know, one minute you're dodging a fireball, and the next it's And that's the game. There's enough remakes of this particular entry that I'd recommend trying one of those, if anything I showed off was particularly interesting. Because it was tied to Final Fantasy and came pretty early on the Game Boy, it showed the beginnings of originality, of being interesting, but stumbled with weak enemy design, weak controls, weak characters, and frankly, not enough spice. But the West was about to discover mana proper with the next installment. A lot of people owe their childhood memories to this game, but I did not have that privilege. What a jump. A fully colored, long-form, active combat JRPG with multiplayer? Secret of Mana gets a lot of criticism, and honestly, if you break down the mechanics, it deserves it, but it's hard to overstate how big this thing is. We're talking about the first time the series really took off in the West. Gamers put aside their apparent love for, you know, ugly games and played something pretty and just let it be that way. And though Final Fantasy's influence is still there, the world that Koichii Ishii envisioned, the childhood-inspired land of exploration and adventure, finally started to take shape. But this is a K-Bash video, so the story's still cheap, AI is really dumb, the maps are full of crap, my thumb is going numb. The combat makes no sense, the magic hurts my bones, the menus are confusing, all the bosses are clones! Okay, game's rough. Kind of fun. I hated this game until about 3 hours in because they drip feed you your squad, and you need them, man. The game was made for friends, for 3 party members, and the hardest boss in the game is boss number 3, and learning the obtuse mechanics involves a fairly interesting learning curve. So combat's jank. I mean, it's kind of cool that the bar at the bottom was changed to show when you should attack. Anything less than 100% and you're doing minimal damage. The combat takes on a kind of rhythm, capturing the essence of a turn-based RPG, fused with the action the Mana series is known for. Your attacks can miss, but it's unclear what's going on. Some enemies fall down, some don't. Despite the increased feedback the game gives, the combat remains fairly difficult to grasp. I don't know what's going on. A clear example is the stacking effect attacks can have where you'll hit an enemy, they'll fall, and you'll hit them again. And they'll take both hits, and indeed get stunned by both hits after each hit, and the effects associated with each resolve. Basically, it means you can stun lock some enemies with attacks. Enemies will do it to you as well, so don't get knocked down in a corner by a pack of enemies, or you're probably in for a trip to the game over screen. In retrospect, the charge attacks were terrible. It's cool to charge up and unleash some crazy huge attack, except you realize it's the best way for any non-magic user to do damage. So you end up holding down a button and inching around a lot in combat. It stunts the action gameplay for no real reason. Also, the bar can be consumed to run real fast in one direction, but only one direction. At least it kinda wrangles these stupid fucking NPC idiots. Characters and plot, they exist. Again. The story actually starts out fairly promising, with Tubby and Alpha watching your character fall to his death by a waterfall. Nice callback to the last game. Anyway, he gets a sword, gets kicked out of his village, gets cooked in a pot. Like, none of this story has that Final Fantasy weight to it, you know? Square's pretty good at making a story that you care enough to follow through with, but then those games kinda need it, because turn-based combat is not for everyone, and especially when it isn't particularly strategic. Action combat's great because it's alive, it's responsive, mostly. Anyone can pick up a controller, hit the button, and the guy swings his sword. It's fun and simple. I won't drag this game for having a story that doesn't really matter, for being silly, because it only needs to be fun to work, right? Like, go ahead and talk to the Mushroom King. Make friends with Haircut Dragon. Rescue... I'm sorry, it appears I've made an error. You've put Santa Claus in your fantasy JRPG! Secret of Mana has a pointless story that plays at relevant themes, but in practice cannot deliver. It's good at drama, at escalation, like the last game. Something weird happens, you resolve it. But then, and so on. It functions. But how about the characters? I will say, I didn't expect a game with these designs to be so popular. You get El Generico girl character, a gross child, and this person. I'll give him props for the main character at least. This game carries forward the multiple weapons of the last game, and the main character's design is so neutral that I believe he could be wielding any of them. Like, he's not some armor-clad knight with a boomerang. He universally checks out. It's not a bad team, like, they kill a guy, watch him exit, and explode, and just cheer. Anyway, I think these guys are psychopaths. I've shown the AI is pretty goddamn terrible, gets caught on all kinds of things, and the most direct way to regain control of them is character swapping. But it's slow and runs the risk of the person you just controlled going haywire. You can kind of manipulate things, but never fully. It really is best played multiplayer. And it wouldn't even be an issue if the levels weren't so full of crap. Every badly placed rock, every object is a potential control hazard, and they're everywhere. You'd think they'd realize this during playtesting and make the levels more barren. They don't need to be fully realized and decadent, they need to function. But oftentimes, levels are loaded with objects that specific weapons interact with, just like the last game, only in that game, the objects in question served as functional doors or barriers. In this game, they're just stumbling blocks that waste your time. Actually, time wasting is a big theme. You gotta distribute your weapons and level them up individually. You gotta level up your magic types individually. You constantly need to return to the blacksmith to improve your weapons, wait for the dumb whip animation to carry you over the pit, break all the obstacles with your axe, fly all over the goddamn place because you don't know where to go, cycle through so much menu. Every time I see this thing mentioned, it's, whoa, new innovative menu system. No. It's slow, it's confusing. If you gave me a normal-ass functioning menu, I wouldn't care. It'd be fine. But because they're making an action-oriented game, they wanted a fresh, minimally disruptive menu that keeps your eyes on the action. Only I have object permanence, and this thing's just another obstacle to get a grip on. It's not tied to analog control for quick spinning, it's on a D-pad. It could be better. It sounds like I hate this game, but you gotta understand, I got my hate out early and just coasted from the 3-hour mark to the end, because the moment-to-moment gameplay is still engaging and the world is still beautiful. So beautiful. The unique, diverse environments, the fantastical places you visit. It's hard not to love this game conceptually. But I haven't even gotten to the worst part. Mana was great because of the combat and bosses, at least if you ask me. So first off, there's about 20 or so unique boss battles in the game, and that's great. Lots of diversity, lots of cool stuff, and the series is really starting to look like something fresh. Something a bit less action RPG and a bit more turn-based because of the bosses doing unblockable full party attacks or spells, and can even steal your turns and just chain spell you to death, so you do it right back. It's so easy to cruise through this game despite the bosses being able to stun lock you, because the minute you unlock magic, nearly every boss encounter turns into a chain spell spamming shit show. For whatever reason, the time between you casting a spell and the enemy being stuck in animation stun favors the player, letting you cast as many spells consecutively as you have mana for, which is often enough to easily destroy anything you fight. They could have fixed this by not allowing damage to stack and forcing invincibility. They could have fixed it by giving magic a cooldown. They could have given magic to the characters like weapons and forced them to charge it up. But they didn't. So the meta of Secret of Mana's combat is playing a one-sided turn-based RPG. That's the single most critical flaw the game has, and why I'll repeat, if you want to play with your friends, and ban magic spam. All told, the ending is good, with more of that wacky mana storytelling at play. The main character is destined to replace his father as a knight who protects the mana tree. The mana tree is his mother. This is recapitulating old story stuff from the first game. There's some weird biblical stuff at play here, but when I squint, everything just goes blurry. I don't know. The main character grieves over not having a mother, and his companions just get all huffy about it. Yeah, well, I never had a mom. What's the big deal anyway? Why don't you think about other people not having moms? I guess you're right, guys. Might be. Just gonna change my notes real quick here. And the end boss fight can't be cheesed with magic. You gotta fight it fairly, with weapon charging. It really feels like a desperate final struggle. You know, that's what I don't get. Mana clearly has potential, has magic seeded throughout its construction, but constantly drops the ball. Because at this point, I'm invested. I want to see what happens next. How they can improve their game. Hopefully they don't do something stupid like not shipping to the States. Trials of Mana hit the West in 2019 in the Collection of Mana. Due to technical issues and localization budget concerns, the original game never left Japan, which really sucks. It's the first proper Mana game that's got a good enough story, good enough combat, art direction, and design to substantiate a fresh IP. Something worth making. Something worth fighting for. Hard to call it a rise when it never got the chance. But I want you to play this game if you want the authentic Mana experience. So let's talk about the improvements. The game starts out with a character select. Okay, this is part of what makes the game special, and something very few games do. All 6 characters have a story, and whoever your main character is controls what content you'll play through, with 3 potential routes shared by 3 pairs of characters. More content, more reasons to replay. Got my team ready to play. Whoa! Yeah! It started me in a duel, and right off the bat, the combat's sharper. Durin has a wait time on his attacks, but it's shorter than waiting for some bar to fill up, and his swings really register on the enemy. Given in combat, you move slower than normal, but overall, the game has faster paced, more impactful combat. Because punching a monster until it explodes into bones is f***ing awesome. The stories are better overall. No more Santa Claus or other funny business. The stories aren't incredible, but they all set up villains, and they all give the characters enough motivation to get the job done. Because being a fighter and getting fireballed by some wizard f***ing sucks. Because drinking until your little sister calls you a pussy f***ing sucks. The stories are willing to be serious when it counts, and usually do just fine, but the game still tries to capture the charm the other games and their crazy stories represented. You're still getting shot out of cannons. You're still checking on the sleeping girl to make sure she's okay. No, please! You're still killing tomatoes? Those are the basics, but if you take away anything, let it be that Trials of Mana is both a better action game and a better RPG than its predecessors. The party is more than a series of backgrounds, they're characters with classes. Given what you see is what you get, Durin ain't putting that sword down, and Kevin here only gets better at martial arts, but that means you're picking what you want. Sword fighter, monk, rogue, sorceress, cleric, Valkyrie. I may have picked a mostly magicless team, but I wanted the more action-oriented experience. And you can choose that. All magic, all melee, it's on you. The game's designed so that any combination of classes can beat the game. I appreciate not needing a healer. Sidebar real quick, Carly or Charlotte, as she's been localized, may be the worst character ever, but getting to exclude her from my party is a divine kindness. Like in any RPG, you upgrade your equipment and level up over time. Notably, the leveling has individual stat caps, so you can't do any insane min-maxing, but there's enough stats to fill up, and it's fairly idiot-proof. Except there's kind of this one thing. 2 stats don't work. Yeah, agility and luck do nothing, except in Hawkeye's case where agility unlocks his moves. Luck was supposed to affect critical rates, and agility was intended to increase your dodge chance. Neither work as intended, and neither were fixed in the collection of mana. In 2019. There's no 2 ways about it. It sucks. It sucks really bad, and the only solace is that, I don't know, who's picking luck in these games when you've got your damage stat or stats and health to contend with? To shore up a weakness with a strength, the class changing, which happens in 2 tiers, as the player makes strategic, intelligent team-building decisions to maximize their utility. Or just pick whatever you like. The game's good enough to let you play it. Look, I love team-building, get super nerdy over it. When I found out I could have Kevin be a strong damage dealer while providing a critical hit bonus to my other high-damage multi-target hitting character, and that Durin could provide elemental damage buffs and health and MP return buffs, well, sorry, did I just cut my audience in half? I seriously love this stuff. With all the cool spells and considerations among the characters and their classes, there's enough room for the player to really dig into the system and make something for themselves. Man, I know they're rebalancing the system, but I already have a party picked out for the remake, so I'm gonna use Kevin as a physical damage dealer, but make him a light healer, while Reese provides AoE silence, buffs, and further frontline capabilities, while Angela rounds out the squad with massive AoE damage. And Jesus, man, did I fucking mention how good this game looks for the SNES? Throw that shit on a menu. $100 a plate! Now, it wouldn't be a K-Bash episode without complaints, so let's talk big suck. Combat is fun enough, but repetitious combat, especially when going through old areas with no easy escape, is not. The slow walk for combat doesn't always screw you over. Oh my god. Suck my dick. But it affects how easy it is to backtrack. I think the designers thought combat should be taken seriously, and it works when you're just playing through it, but they could use a break and run button. As much as I love the combat, it's fairly easy to zone out or lose track of where you are, and let the overlapping sprites turn into a big saturated mess. Especially because you can hold A and your character will auto-path to and auto-attack the nearest enemy. There's a big chunk of required grinding to upgrade your characters to the 3rd tier of classes, and even though it's easy enough to do, I had to look up the appropriate spots to do it optimally, which just isn't great design. No reason you can't just hit the level requirement and upgrade. And lastly, the single worst thing in the game. It doesn't know what it wants to be. I avoided spellcasters because I wanted the more action-oriented experience, yeah? But no matter what you do, the longer the game goes on, the more pausing and casting happens on screen. The more frequent game pausing ability cutscenes happen. This coincides with bosses, so let's talk about it. There's a ton of boss fights in this game, as usual, and they're all super cool. And while you repeat some of them, the game focuses more on original and specific challenges in each boss fight, rather than sheer quantity. They're all very visually distinct, interesting to look at, very mana, you know? And most of them aren't hard enough to halt the player's progress. But no matter what, you're gonna need to heal, so with items or with magic, you need to pause the action. In almost every fight, you're gonna need to use big powerful moves, which unfortunately pause the game, given it's usually not much time, but it adds up. The game seriously starts to feel like a turn-based RPG by the end. Well, I mean, right at the end of Durin's Route, there's this fight, and he counters your big special moves and does this.
What's this? That's my attack, bro. Get your own. Well, what the fuck?
So to beat him, you just hold A. Video games aren't even video games, man. Where's the game? Then you fight the mage who dunked on Durin, except I've killed approximately 10,000 of God's creatures with my bare hands, and these two guys watched me. You know what that means? Like I mentioned, there's 3 potential final bosses, all suitably epic looking, and man, this game's such an adventure. The last one ended with this ridiculous back-to-back boss rush, a brutal dungeon crawl, and some decent final bosses. I don't really feel like my time's wasted when I play Trials, except for the grinding sections because the game's just that fun. When I went back over my notes, I realized I said a lot of negative things about the game, and not a lot of nice ones. But months later, I can only think about how much I like the game. It sticks with you, makes you want another shot, a new team, and it's sharp enough and interesting enough for sure, but above that, it's the first time the world really came into its own. Even with the remaining Moogle status ailment and the Black Mage enemies, the game is unlike anything I've ever played. And more than that, it's something I want to escape into. I think that's what Koichii Ishii was trying to do, and even if it took a while, I think they succeeded beautifully in that innocent goal. And man, it's such a hopeful series too. You're always saving this person or that town, and even when the world's on the brink of annihilation, a band of heroes always pulls through and revitalizes the world with courage and teamwork. And a really cool sword. But Trials never came to the West, not when it mattered, even when a fan-translated ROM hit the web, because the gaming industry was on the brink of revolution. Pixelated graphics were yesterday's news, and the series struggled to expand on what it built. Hey, it's K-Bash. Special thanks goes out to my $4 patrons, whose names are on the screen. The show's on its way somewhere good thanks to the community's generosity. And special thanks goes out to my extra generous patrons who are Errol, Aquari Wave, Azero, Bazcart, Boha, Caesar T, Chief, Color Crimson, Corgi the Lad, Crusader Bear, Don't Worry About It, Dylan Coffee, Exa, Frankenstitch, Harkaj, Huey, Jason Lasky, Jaden, J-Deus, Joke Frog, Justin Sherry, Kelvin, Lady Cerebellum, Lego Sid, Markules, Max Gomez, Milky Moo Official, Orn Magnus Palson, Quillworth, Reggie Rodriguez, Salty Smasher, Super Sandwich Guy, Tom Krawick, Venom, Vic, Walter Taggart, well shit, Zane The Pure. If you'd like to help support the show and make it even better, check out my Patreon. We've got all kinds of goals and lots of rewards in store. Stay tuned for more. K-Bash out.